Welcome everyone who stayed and who is here brand new. I am so pleased to introduce, for those of you who don't know, Ethann Fox. We are both here on behalf of the Flower of Life Center, and the Flower of Life Center for Human Evolution is actually the brainchild of Ethann. He had a major spiritual awakening in his life and decided that we should really do something on the planet to raise human consciousness. And the Flower of Life was born. So he is overseeing all of the volunteers that we have. We have a variety of different projects. We work with conscious youth. We have an expo in Detroit that we put on that is amazing. November 10th through the 12th, we have a conscious magazine. The thing that's really unique about Ethann and this organization is that you can go anywhere on the planet right now to find out what's wrong with us and what's wrong with humanity. But there's not a lot of places you can go to find out what's right and what's coming down the pipeline and what's really good. And that is the goal of this organization, to bring people into an awareness that everything's okay and we're going in the right direction. And there's some things popping up here on the earth that are great signs of that. So you're going to see that as a thread through everything that we do. And that energy is supported by Ethann. Now, a lot of you might know Ethann as the host of Awake And Empowered TV. And the voice behind my channelings. But what you might not know is he's also a brilliant astrologer and numerologist and has an incredible gift with energy. So he does an energy transfer and discourse, and I'll let him explain what that is about. But something else I want to mention, for those of you who are here, who are healers, teachers, working in this area, Ethann's really bringing something right now on the planet that I don't think anyone else is doing. He has a background in business and marketing, but he intermixes that with his spiritual side. So he combines astrology, numerology, looks at your energy, uses his energy, and helps light workers on the planet to really launch their gifts in a unique way. I was his first guinea pig. I walked into Flower of Life one day during my initial awakening and met Ethann, did an energy transfer, had an amazing experience. I booked an astrology, numerology session with him, sat across from him, and he said, I think you can channel your channel, something special about you. You've got a spiritual gift. I was like, no. I said, I hear stuff sometimes. He said, no. He says, it's right here in your chart. He says, I know. You've got something big to do in this life. And he carried me through from that to helping me launch my brand, helping me get my message out. And really, if you're interested in this type of work and really creating something unique, he will push you to the brink of uncomfortable, which is where the magic happens. So with that, I will introduce Ethann Fox.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you for that amazing introduction. And that is how I work. I do make a lot of people uncomfortable, but but it's all for the good. So, how many of you have never heard of me or my work at all? Okay. And how many of you have heard of me but you've never been through an energy transfer process? Okay, a lot of you. All right. Okay, so if you've watched my videos online, I talk sometimes a little bit about my background and how I came to do this, but I don't really get too much in depth because most of the time we're speaking to an audience in the Michigan area, and we've been doing that for many years. This is the first time we've ventured outside of Michigan to do an event, although our videos are all over the place. So I don't typically go too in-depth into my life journey with that audience because they've heard pieces of it forever, so I don't want to bore them too much with it. So today, because most of you are new to this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my journey and how I came to do this. And about an hour and a half into it, we'll do the actual, what I call energy transfer. So first of all, I don't consider myself a healer. So in the context of what we're doing here today, we're not doing what you typically may perceive as a healing. I'm here as a representation of the awakening of consciousness. And my role here, although we've had many people come to our events who have had dramatic physical healing experiences, sometimes just from coming one time, and I'll share some of those stories with you. My purpose here is not physical healing. My purpose here is to help primarily light workers, which all of you are, or you wouldn't be here, because we all resonate with vibrations or frequencies that resonate with us, and so we're drawn to those things. So the fact that you're here tells me that you're all here to play some kind of a significant role in the awakening of consciousness. And these are the individuals who I work with, people like Michaela and others like her, who are here to be on the forefront of the awakening of consciousness in some way or another. So I get involved and I work with them, whether either if it's as simple as the energy transfer or really hands-on, like in the case of Michaela, where I help them to get out into the world and really make an impact. So my role here is to awaken light workers, remove the blocks that are in the way of you fulfilling your life purpose, and helping you to get out there and make a big impact. So the energy transfer, what it does is it removes the density, the karmic density that is in the way, that is blocking you from seeing your potential. And it also raises your vibration and consciousness so that you are able to have access to aspects of yourself that have been dormant or have never been available to you to use. So many people I work with as children, they had spiritual gifts, but then throughout life, those abilities became dormant or disappeared from their awareness. So the energy transfer will unlock those and reawaken those things in you. So a lot of people come to our events, to the energy transfer, they will start having awareness of their spiritual gifts, or those abilities will start to come back and open up in them, as well as the ability to opportunities to manifest those. So we are here to help awaken you in a way that you can't really do very easily on your own. Not that you don't have the capacity to, but because this dimension, because of the third dimension and the way that the third dimension is structured at the moment, you accumulate a lot of density throughout your life and throughout many incarnations that sort of prevent you from doing that. So let me start with maybe a little bit about my childhood journey. So I lived a pretty normal life. My family is not very spiritually oriented at all. And I did not realize until just a few years ago that I had this ability. But since that time, so those of you, any of you watch the videos where I'm with Barb? Okay. So Barb's my comic relief, for those of you who know her. So Barb's very funny. She's an aura reader, and she came to one of our Flower of Life events some years ago. And she saw my energy field and commented that it was very unusual. And she's been seeing aura since she was a child, and she's older than I am. So it made me think, well, there must be something significant about that, and so I have to explore what that is. So that was the first energy transfer event that I did with a group of people. Purely as an experiment, because I come from a more left-brain intellectual background, and it was an experiment to see what would happen if I decided to follow this certain process that I intuitively already knew that I could do, that had happened with other people throughout my life. So she was there able to observe the energy moving in the room with a group of people. And that was our first event, purely experimental. And then month after month, we did it in our local area as an experiment to satisfy my left brain curiosity. That was the only reason we did it in the beginning. And so we did it, and over the years, people had such amazing experiences, and Barb could see the energy in the room moving around, and everybody's auras doubled, tripled, quadrupled in size after one visit. And we've been observing the people who've been coming to our events month after month. Their auras are, in many cases, larger than the room as they're walking in the door, which when she first sees people coming for the first time, majority of people she sees, their auras are very small, very close to their body. So we know that there is a cumulative effect on your energy field. We also know that it affects your consciousness level. And in the energy that flows through the energy transfer, there is multidimensional information that's transmitted to you as well. which your intellectual or your mind will, over time, which may take weeks, months, years, start to interpret. And what it'll do is it'll allow you to see and perceive your reality in a different way than you were able to before. Now, the other part of the energy transfer, that's the energy that I'm sending to you. And so from that, increase in energy field, multidimensional information, raise in consciousness. The other part that is a little bit unusual, that some spiritual masters and Buddhists, in the Buddhist faith, I've been told that this is something that every once in a while a Buddha comes to earth and has this ability to do this. But the other part is that I am able to take on your karmic density. So when I say karmic density, I want to be clear about what that is, because there's a lot of misperception about karma and what that means, and I have a very specific explanation of what I refer to as karma. So karma, let's use an example that you'll all understand. Let's say a karmic relationship, a soulmate relationship, somebody who you've been with many incarnations, and in this life you meet that person again. So that is a karmic relationship, because the relationship is somebody who you've shared experience with before, and you come together again in this life. Now, that relationship may be very positive or very loving, or it could be very turbulent. And what determines that is not the karma, but the density that accompanies the karma. So let's say in another incarnation, you and that person went through a lot of suffering or difficulty in that relationship. And quite often that happens. I mean, if you've been with a soulmate long enough, you've had lifetimes where you've had some sort of difficulty. And that difficulty moves into this incarnation as a density or a weight of a dense energy. So now you have the soulmate and you have the density, so that is karmic density. If you remove the density, you still have the relationship and the soulmate, but you don't have the weight that's causing suffering. This is why a lot of soulmates, they meet again and they have very difficult, turbulent relationships, because they have brought this karmic density into this incarnation. They may not have a conscious awareness of what that is, but they make life very difficult for each other because of that density. So in that way, you have density that you've brought into this incarnation from many incarnations. And because there's no time, all those incarnations coexist right now. Everybody understand that? Okay. So you guys are very advanced, because if I were to talk to a mainstream audience about that, it would be totally over their heads, right? So time, all experiences coexist. Your past lives, future lives, they all exist in this space and time. So you may have brought into this current awareness of an incarnation a lot of karmic density from many other incarnations. So your future incarnations are also creating karmic density that is affecting this one, as well as your past. So all of that karmic density exists here now that you've brought to deal with. And normally, most human beings will go through their linear lifetime, meaning linear, when I say linear, I'm referring to our human perception of time. So tomorrow is tomorrow, yesterday is yesterday. They don't coexist. So normally human beings come into this incarnation with a karmic density that they must work through human experience. So maybe you live 50, 100 years in this incarnation, and you work through that karmic density through experiences in this life. This is how karma is normally worked through. And sometimes, and in most cases, it will take you lifetimes of experience to resolve the karmic density that you brought into one lifetime. Well, the energy transfer, and there's no other way to deal with that. Now, the energy transfer will allow you to release a lot of that density in just one of these experiences. So when we get to that point, I will ask you to trust that process and to send that density to me. Now, if Barb was here, and if you watch any of her videos with me, she can actually see that karmic density coming from each of you to me in the room. So you will no longer be carrying it with you outside of this room, and neither will I, because this body has been physically prepared to do this in this life. Now, I didn't come to this awareness until about 7. As Michaela said, I had an awakening. I've had many spiritual experiences throughout my life, but one of the most significant ones was about 7 years ago, where I had entered a heightened state of consciousness and was in a state of bliss for about 6 months of my life. And in that time, I came to the awareness of this organization that we were going to start, and the wheels of motion that led to everything that we're doing now started right around that time. And at that time, I started bringing into my life people like Barb and Michaela and so on. And through them, I've been able to figure out and understand what this ability is and how it works. And also, because of Michaela, I've been able to speak with this consciousness that uses this physical body to facilitate this process. So when I say I'm doing this, I'm referring to a collective consciousness that's actually doing it. My physical body was prepared in this incarnation to do this. So this isn't something I would suggest you do at home. So it is, in speaking with that collective consciousness, what I was told was that with my agreement, they prepared me as a soul. I had already gone through preparations to be here as a soul and as a physical body in order to take on the karmic density of others. And that they had the permission from me before my conscious awareness 7 years ago, or 6 or 7 years ago, to use this physical body for this purpose all throughout my life. So this has been going on since I was born, but I didn't know until a few years ago. And so now I lived in a very conventional, mainstream household as a child, and I lived a very conventional life prior to that. Prior to 7 years ago, I've been in business my whole life, and I was a professional trader, so I was one of those guys who stared at flashing screens of numbers all day long. So this was my life, and so it was quite a leap of faith to step in this direction and to do this kind of work. But as it turns out, this collective consciousness was using this physical body from birth onward to facilitate this karmic density clearing for all of those who are in my environment. And as I look back on my life now, I can see that a lot of the unusual things that have happened throughout my life that I couldn't make any sense of back then were the result of that. So now I do it on purpose, with intention. And some of you who are very energy sensitive may feel the energy the moment you walk in the room. A lot of people do. And I do this now not only in person, but people who watch my show also experience it. Some people put photographs of me in certain environments, and it affects that environment. It also is present in my voice. So people who, if I do an energy transfer on a recording, and that recording is listened to over and over again, that recording will facilitate the same energy transfer that the original recording created. If you watch some of my YouTube videos of events like this, which this event will probably be posted to YouTube, people use these videos to facilitate the same process that we're going to do here today. And you'll see from the comments that many people are having some very dramatic experiences from the videos. So the consciousness is present in the video all throughout the day, all throughout the week, every day of the year. There are people watching my videos, listening to my recordings with photographs in their environments who are facilitating this process we're going to do here today without my conscious awareness. So at any time throughout the day, there is karmic density coming toward me to facilitate this. So my primary role here in this life is to help individuals like you and the collective consciousness to release the karmic density that is slowing us down from our evolutionary journey. As of a year ago in September, I also, from this collective consciousness through Michaela, was able to ask them, is it okay for me to do this on a global level? And because I was feeling like it was time to do that, and I was told that it was time for me to do that. So once a month now, I've been doing a global collective consciousness event as well, which is virtual. So some people do consciously participate, but it is including the entire population of the planet's collective consciousness and karmic density in this process. Now, in the last year, I've noticed a lot of very positive things happening in the world. Is it the result of that? I don't know. My intellectual mind questions those things. But nonetheless, we have been doing that for that period of time, and Michaela has channeled after the fact about some of the effects of it, and so it appears that we're making some progress. So my goal here is not as a physical healer, although if you are here with some physical issues, because we make such a radical shift in your energy field, it may also shift your physical health. But I'm not here for that purpose. I'm here primarily to awaken you to why you're here so that you can play a role in this awakening of consciousness. So and by the way, this is interactive. If you have any questions you want to ask along the way, feel free to go ahead.
I have a question. Can we put other people, do we have to ask permission of their higher self before we do this, or can we just say, I have, a whole group of family members that I would like to,
This is a common question, actually, and well, first, I want to respect the fact that all of you are very conscious of the free will of others. But I want to also explain to you a different concept of free will than you're probably exposed to. Because when I do the global collective energy transfer, I don't ask every person, is it okay that I do this? Right? I just do it. Because the collective consciousness of the planet is moving forward whether one person likes it or not. And so as that collective moves forward, you can choose to be here or you can choose not to be here, but if you're here, then you're going to move forward. So I have not had to, and in channeling with Michaela, I asked that question, do I have to ask permission? And I don't have to because of the time that we're in now. Now, let me take this to an individual level. You are all here in this room right now because we're sharing a collective timeline experience, meaning you all have your individual experiences. When you leave the door and you go out into your life and you go into your own unique relationships and experiences, you are not on the same timeline of experience as me. But right now, we are sharing a collective experience. So in this room, we're having a conversation. Whether that conversation and collective experience continues or not is determined by our level of interaction in the future. So whenever a human being is in your environment, because somebody asked me recently, well, is it okay if I take a picture of you and put it in my workplace on my desk if it is going to affect everybody who I work with without their permission, or even without their knowledge that this is doing anything? And the thing is, those people who chose to be in your space chose to be influenced in that timeline of awareness. Otherwise, they wouldn't be in that experience. They wouldn't be sharing that collective experience. So all the billions of people on the planet are here, and I'm facilitating this energy transfer with all of them because they chose to be in awareness in this timeline that I'm doing this type of process. So if you do decide to include your family members or friends, that's perfectly all right. And to some degree, they will evolve through the process as well. And if they are not ready for the acceleration of consciousness that's taking place on the planet, they will just simply shift timelines to another one where this is not an impact. So free will is not a factor in the way that you're thinking. Free will is a factor. Those individuals chose to be in your space prior to their incarnation. So they chose to be here in this timeline with me at this time prior to their incarnation. The free will was already exercised at that time, even though their conscious awareness in this life may not have any perception of that, and they may resist that. So that hopefully answers the question. Yeah, go ahead.
All the picture frames in the stores with the photo of somebody, can we place you in?
Well, I want to say, first of all, you're not aware, and I have, because I'm one of the wonderful things about my life these days is I get to be surrounded by people like Michaela and Barb and so many other amazing people, like all of you, who are doing incredible things. And so I can utilize their gifts to help me understand the universe better. And one thing I can tell you is that everybody's photograph contains their essence. So if you are listening to music, let's say, of a particular artist, that artist's consciousness is present in that music and is affecting you. Now, if your consciousness is very high, which I'm sure all of yours are, then you're not as affected as somebody whose consciousness is very low. But everybody's picture embodies the essence of who they are. So it's not just me, but if this consciousness is present in me, then yes, the picture of wherever you would put that picture will affect the environment vibrationally and all of those in that environment. So I wouldn't suggest you switch my picture out in every frame in a store, but certainly it would have that kind of a positive effect. Mm-hmm.
Before you guys got here, I was going through horrible physical thing, too much energy, whatever was causing it, I don't know. But I tell you, when you guys went, you left, about half an hour, 45 minutes later or something, it was like something within my body, it kind of clicked, and a release, and all of that tension, I keep saying, my God, I have a fist in the solar plexus. It just went, and I just realized it was you. I never even put that much energy in this moment. We didn't stay in this. Because, something like that, it was, I wasn't in so much pain for months like that. So it went like so fast. It happened, like I said, I think it was a few times left. And I thought, this is awesome. I told Chris about it, wow, I guess I dematerialized it. So anyway.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing it.
For that.
Yeah.
Ethann, do you have a process that you're doing intentionally to discharge the energy as being the conduit, the facilitator? The reason I ask as the part B is because a lot of us that do healing work are very empathic and sometimes get a little challenged with not taking on other people's energies.
Yes, and like I said earlier, don't do this at home. So my physical body was prepared, my soul was prepared, and the body was prepared to do this in this life. There is, now in speaking with Michaela, she said there are 5 people, or I forget who said this, but there are 5 people on the planet right now who have the ability to do this. And of those, the majority are children. One, I believe, was an adult, but he's doing it only in his small region. So this is not something that everybody should try to do, and most healers should not necessarily, obviously as a healer, you're going to be somewhat affected by energies in your environment, and most of you are very empathic. So, but to intentionally ask a group of people to send their density to you is not wise. But I want to differentiate me, the human ego self of me, is different from the me that is the body me that is facilitating this process. So the human ego self that is me is talking to you right now. But the physical body me, the energy transfer is actually, the body is just a conduit. It is a vessel or a machine that's been prepared in a certain way in this life to communicate with this collective consciousness that utilizes it for their purpose that I agreed to before coming here. So when the energy transfer happens, it is this collective of many beings, of many different races, and archangels, angels, extraterrestrial, quite a few different beings that are using this body as a conduit. And I've asked them, well, why don't you just do it yourself? Why do you need me? And they said that the nature of the energy that they're using, which is, it's a 13th dimensional energy, is something that they cannot bring directly into this third dimension on their own. So they required someone whose physical body was prepared in order for them to use it as a conduit to the third dimension to assist those who are here and ready for that. So the energy that flows this way is coming from them to all of you from a 13th dimensional consciousness. So it's a 13th dimensional energy. Now the energy that you're sending to me, they are also processing. Now Barb, who can see the energy, and when she's in the room with me, she will watch everybody's auras and she'll watch the energy coming to me. And so we've been doing this for many years. At first it was because she was concerned, what if everybody's sending all this dark energy to me? What happens to me? But what we found was, month after month doing these events, as your dark energy comes to me, it disintegrates as it hits my energy field. So it doesn't actually come to me. It almost doesn't even touch me. But what she says, when the group is very large, or when we've done remote events with many hundreds or thousands or even billions of people at a time, she can't actually see me in the room because the darkness around me is so dense. So for a while she'll see me and all of a sudden I'll just disappear behind this dark, dense cloud. And then as it clears up, she starts to see me again. So this is how the process works, but inside of that though, I'm in my own little cocoon, so I'm not really affected by it. But the benefit is you're not carrying that home with you either. So that's the reason it works is because I had an agreement prior to this incarnation to do this, and I had to go through many lifetimes of preparation to get to an evolution as a soul to be able to even do it. Now, this collective consciousness, I've had an opportunity to speak with them many times through Michaela. And they've referred to themselves as, there is a voice that speaks on behalf of the collective, and that voice refers to himself as the King of Kings. And there's also sometimes another being that refers to himself as Muhammad. I actually never have asked if it's the same person, but anyhow, not Muhammad, the religious figure, but he is a figure who has been my teacher through many incarnations, and Michaela actually can see him. Barb can see him too, so I guess he's a very tall, bearded man she always sees him around me. So this being is working with this collective to facilitate this process when we do it. Now, I've also had the opportunity, now, because I was with Michaela from the beginning of her channeling journey, at the very beginning of all of that, a lot of times I would ask her to channel for me for practice. And she would channel, and Mary Magdalene always would come through for me. And, I'm a little skeptical too, because I come from a very intellectual background, so I test a lot of things to make sure that they're real. Now, Mary would come through, and Mary would refer to me as her son. And so I questioned that at first, and I thought she probably just says that to everybody, right? And so time after time we would channel, and Mary would say, would actually look at me as a mother would look to her son. And so after a few times I asked her, why do you keep calling me your son? And she said that I was one of her children in that incarnation with Jesus, and this is why in this life I have this ability. All of her children, all of their children had this type of healing ability in that incarnation, and as they've gone forth into future incarnations, they still possess that ability. So there's a genetic lineage also that I have that allows me to do this. So similar type of thing that he was doing in that time is also present in this body and in this soul energy that you're going to experience. So that, yeah.
I'm just curious, at some point, do you intend to sort of go on complete autopilot where you're just taking density at all times?
Mm-hmm.
I know you have a call-in thing, but it's at a certain time of day. But you could literally just
Yeah.
do that anytime, right?
It happens already all the time.
Right.
As I said, the YouTube videos of these events are out there, and people are using them all throughout the day. There are people who watch my webcasts or even have private sessions with me on video calls, and they will record them, and they will use them over and over again without my knowledge. So yes, it's already happening, and in the long run, that is what will happen. Now, there is a distinction, though, between the types of ways that I do this. So when I do this in groups or on video calls or whatever, the intensity is not as high. So, because I don't know what all of you are ready for. So we keep it at a certain level of intensity, especially those who are brand new to this process. Sometimes the first few times there can be a little bit of physical discomfort. Maybe you're extra tired for a few days, or you feel some sort of a physical reaction. That does happen sometimes. So the energy transfers at events like these are at the lowest level of intensity and progress. Now, I do offer, as you were mentioning, a remote program where it's up to 12 sessions per month that are remote, and they're virtual, so you don't actually talk to me or anything. But that intensity is one step higher. And so people who join that program are, I'm assuming, interested in a more accelerated process. Now, I've had people join that program after coming to an event, and after the first session, they just can't do it. And so we've had to either cancel their program or spread out their sessions over several months versus 1 month, because the intensity is higher. So the accelerated process is higher. So there's a difference between the different levels that I do. Then there are my private sessions. Now, private sessions, I had somebody yesterday. Private sessions, I work with you physically, and so I will physically touch you in the head. Now, over the years, I started doing energy transfers a few years ago, one time through my eyes, but the reaction that the woman had that I was working with was so extreme that I never did it again. And then I did it one time with Michaela, and she had a pretty dramatic, yeah.
I would doubt it does.
Because
it's an accelerated process.
yes.
I recommend it.
So the first person I did it with was at a retreat. It was before I met Michaela, and I just intuitively felt like I could do this. So I was in this room with this woman. The door was shut. Nobody could see inside. All the people running the retreat were outside, and the woman I was with, she just started screaming obscenities and the top of her lungs, and everybody outside thought we better go check on him because, they thought she was beating me or something. And so that level of intensity, I've never done it. Now, somebody came for a private session yesterday, and I offered that. So she was only the third person I did that. So the intensity is much higher, but the growth from one session is very dramatic. But keep in mind that the adjustment can also be very dramatic, especially for somebody who's brand new to this process. So yes, there are people who, to some degree, this is happening to me already 24 hours a day, 7 days a week without my awareness. This consciousness is facilitating it. So people watching my videos, I have no idea when they're watching them. But it works every time because the consciousness is omnipresent. They are aware of everybody's intention in every moment. And so they can facilitate this through this body whenever they want because I gave them that permission to do that prior to coming here. And so, yes, at a certain point, there will be millions, billions, I don't know, people doing this with their own conscious intention, but without mine. But it's not the same at every level that I work with someone because at the more extreme levels, it's a bit much, I think, for most people. So, does that kind of answer?
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
Well, just to clarify what my experience was when he did that, he was pulling emotional density out of me, and I couldn't even control it. So it would almost well up, and you would feel like this intense emotion. You think, oh, and then you just have to let it out because there's nowhere else for it to go.
So I would just have a blurt out something, that I couldn't control it, and it was beyond me, and it was just stuff that was stuck, and then I would feel it again, just starting to percolate, and like, oh, here it comes again, so it's, it's a really good emotional detox, I would call it.
Yeah, if you're ready for that sort of thing, yeah. I mean, you have no control, because when karmic density is released, the thoughts, the emotions, even words that are connected or tied in with it will come with it. So during this process that we're doing today, some of you may cry, some of you may laugh out loud. That happens a lot in my audiences, because the density is attached to experiences usually that you've had. And those experiences might have been sad, they might have been things that have laughter associated with them. And you may laugh for no reason, you have no idea why. Or cry for no reason, you have no idea why. But it's because the density that was released was connected to an emotion, and the emotion will go with it, even if you don't know what the emotion was originally connected to. So when we do it through the eyes, when I do it through the eyes, is because the eyes have the least amount of resistance between two people. So doing it that way, the energy flows very freely, and so the experience is more dramatic. Now, I came to first know that, consciously realize that I was doing this, actually long before I had my spiritual awakening. A long time, all kinds of unusual things have happened throughout my life, which in my earlier left brain intellectual life, I just put those things on the shelf and said those things didn't really happen because they were a little too far out for me at the time. So, but when I was much younger, I was able to charge batteries with my hands. I was able to start cars that couldn't start with my hands. But I thought coincidence, Everybody does it. Well, from an intellectual perspective, it doesn't make any sense, right? But anyhow, there was this, I used to work a long time, 20, 30 years ago, at this apartment complex, and I was one of the managers in the complex. And so I went to this woman's apartment, and she was quite a bit older and had some very serious health problems. She walked with a cane, and she had cancer and a variety of other illnesses. She couldn't lift her hand over her shoulder, so she couldn't wash her hair in the tub. She had to wash her hair in the kitchen sink using the sprayer, so because she could bend over and do that. So she had all kinds of pain and a list of health issues and pharmaceutical remedies that were about twice as long as that. So I went to her house, and she liked to talk. So I used to go to her house, and you could never get out. It's like a vortex of you get sucked in and you never get sucked out. You never get to get out of there. But anyway, so I went to her house, and she was complaining about this intense migraine headache that she was having, and she was telling me how when she has these migraine headaches, her vision would go completely white sometimes at extremes. And so she would describe how she's driving down the road sometimes, and her vision goes completely white. And so these are one of those instances in my life where I thought, if I don't do something to help this person and she gets herself killed on the highway somewhere, then I'll feel like, I should have done something. So now at that time, I had no belief that I had an ability to do anything, but I just had an intuition about it. So I told her, now she didn't believe in any of this. Okay, so she's very mainstream kind of person, but she likes to talk. So I said, you know what? Why don't you just keep talking? Let me just stand behind you for a few minutes. So I'm just standing behind her, not touching her, just hands like a foot away from her. And I said, just keep talking. She kept talking and talking and talking. And I said, well, tell me what's happening to this headache. And so she said, well, the headache's kind of moving around in her head, and then it was the size of a pinpoint, and then it disappeared. And I thought, well, coincidence, right? I mean, the headache probably just went away on its own. And so I left, and she was better, and I was glad she was better, and she ran out of things to say. So I went back to work. And the next day, she starts Now, this is back in the day when we had pagers, so... So she starts paging me all morning, and I just ignored it at first. And then she starts calling our office, and we hadn't opened yet, so nobody answered the phone. And finally, somebody answered the phone, and this woman is going on and on about how she has never felt this good. Well, in a long time, and she can walk without a cane or a walker. She can lift her hand over her head for the first time in many, many years. So she can wash her hair now in the tub. And over the course of several months, she stopped taking most of her pharmaceutical remedies, and she was in really great shape. Now, I still was skeptical. Okay. I have to be honest. Yeah. I have to be honest. I mean, this is a long time ago, so I was skeptical because I didn't know I could do anything. But now, in hindsight, these experiences show me that this was going on throughout my life. Now, Barb has looked at pictures of me from when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and as a child, and she can see energy fields in the picture, and she could see from the photograph that I had the same energy field then as I do now. So this is something that I was born with and not something that I later came to learn to do. Now, about 1997, I met these two women who were at the time about my age, just a couple of years difference. And I actually, I had gone to a psychic some 6 months prior to that, which I didn't do very often, but anyway, I went to this guy and he said, "You're going to meet your soulmates this year." And I was single at the time, so it seemed like a good idea. And so he was the minister of a spiritualist church, which I'd never heard of a spiritualist church, but I was curious. So he said, "Come to our service." So I did. So I go to this service, and I'm sitting in the audience, and I was the first person there. And you just sit there and close your eyes and meditate. So I did that. A few minutes later, a woman sits to my right. And I open my eyes and I look at her. She has a wedding ring on. And I thought, no, she can't be my soulmate. And a few minutes later, another woman sits to my left. I open my eyes, look at her. No wedding ring. She could be my soulmate. So I thought, okay. So now, but in the whole place, there were only 3 of us at that time. And they sat right next to either side of me. Now, later on, they shared with me that they just felt like they had to. Well, as it turned out, the 3 of us had shared many incarnations. Now, we found that out because we started using hypnosis to regress each other. Well, not me, but the other 2. And found out that we had shared many incarnations prior to this. Now, I, at the time, had no awareness that I had healing ability, at least not consciously, but I had this, I always had this feeling that if I didn't help someone in need, that I would regret not doing that. So whenever a situation came up, I did it anyway, even though I didn't really believe I was doing anything at the time. So this is one of those cases where the woman who was married, her husband had a very serious heart condition. So I volunteered to go to their house every day after my regular job to work on him, not believing I could really do anything. It's a long story, but all kinds of very unusual things happened with him after I started working with him, and around the 3 of us. It would take me hours just to share all the stories. But anyway, we did share some kind of very interesting connection between us to where we were telepathic, so we could communicate at long distances with each other. Now, I'm a left-brain intellectual guy at this time, right? I really doubted any of this was really happening, but I couldn't deny that it was very unusual. So one of the women in the group, or the 3 of us, one of the 2 women, one who was not married, had a lot of she was very emotional, always seemed to be suffering. And she shared with me when we first met that she had a reoccurring dream throughout her life where she and her sisters went through a very traumatic experience. And this dream had reoccurred throughout her life, and nobody else had ever entered the dream, just her and her sisters, until we met in this life. And when we met in this life, I started popping up in her dream. But what happened was I would rescue her from this situation. in the dream. Now, we had no idea what that meant at the time. So one night when I was going to this other girl's house to work on her husband, all three of us were together. And I had this sense that I had to do something with this girl who had had this nightmare. But she wouldn't let me touch her. She was afraid because she was afraid of the consequences, because she actually was she was actually a channel, medium and a channel, which I had no concept of those things back then. But she was speaking to some other consciousness throughout the time we were together. And she could sense my ability, which I had no concept of at the time. And she was afraid that if I did this for her, that the consequences could be more than she could handle. So she refused. So she refused, she started crying, and I said, okay, I'm not going to do anything. Let's not worry about that. So I said, I'm not going to do anything, just give me a hug. So I just gave her a hug, and innocently, right? I didn't mean to do anything. It was just a hug. It was just a hug. It wasn't even a soulmate hug. It was just a hug. And I gave her this hug, and in that hug, something passed on to me. Now, I am not somebody who had these kinds of feelings or sensations. Most of you are very empathic. Because I do this energy transfer work, I am not sensitive to external energies. Otherwise, with thousands of people sending me their karmic density all throughout the day, I'd be crawling in a corner, right? So she sent this to me, and I felt it. My body, when ice cold, I felt it like a very dark energy. And so now I knew I had enough sense to say, well, I should go because I don't know what this is, but I don't want to give it to anybody else. So I left. And it was summertime, and I'm driving home with the heat on because I'm freezing, because whatever this was very, very dense. And that was the first time that I had a conscious awareness of taking on the density of another person. So I went home. I went to sleep that night, woke up the next day, whatever it was gone. But replaced by it was this incredible state of bliss that at that point in my life I had never experienced before. I can't describe it. If you've experienced that, then you know what it's like. Actually, you may experience it from the energy transfer. A lot of people do. But that was the first conscious awareness that I had of being able to take on the density of another person. Now, after that experience, her nightmare went away. So what we can say from that is that nightmare represented some kind of a karmic experience. Now, maybe it was a psychological trauma from this life, or maybe it was from a past life, some kind of an experience that showed up as a nightmare. And when I took that density from her, the nightmare disappeared because the density wasn't there anymore. So I've had many experiences like that throughout my life that were very unusual, that occurred before I had any awareness of this. So it's only been the last 3 or 4 years that I've been doing this with intention with groups of people. So, any questions so far about any of that?
Were you scared?
Of that first time? Yeah. Well, that first time, it's interesting in hindsight. Those people, those 2 women came into my life in order to teach me who I was. And that's why I think they had such a close soul tie. I was not afraid of the density, but I am a very peaceful sleeper. I don't typically have nightmares or anything like that. But in that instance, I went home and I had some pretty disturbing dreams, which at that time didn't really occur. So, and I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt the emotional part of that energy. Now, as I've been doing this now in groups of people for many years, I don't feel anything from it. So all of you can do this. I have people all over the world doing this at the same time. And I have people in my advanced program who are sending this density to me all, different times of the day. And I have no sensation. I should say, I have a sensation of it happening. I feel it when people send me density, but it's just a subtle sensation in my third eye. It is nothing more than that. So I have no discomfort. I go home feeling the same, wake up the same, nothing. There's no adverse effect to me at all. Did you have a question?
Was there an occurrence that happened before the 6 months bliss?
A spiritual experience, you mean?
Yeah, was there something that happened? You said that you were in 6 months of bliss. Was there something that experience you had?
Well, that was the pivotal shift point of my life, from a mainstream life to a not so mainstream life. Nowadays, I don't really live what you would call a mainstream life. In fact, I don't even know what's going on in the mainstream world anymore. People seem to be angry with politicians and this and that. I have no idea until somebody actually tells me. But that point was a shift from my former life, where I was, up to that point, I had been in business my entire life. Even as a child, I was very much in that world, business and financial world. And I was a professional trader prior to that. I ran an international trading organization, so there were thousands of people around the world who work for brokerage houses and such who belonged to my organization, and I taught them how to trade and brought in other traders to teach. So this was my life. But after that experience happened, I walked away from all of it.
What experience happened?
My awakening experience. So the awakening, I can't pinpoint what the awakening experience, what the trigger might have been, if there even was one. I just know that I woke up one day and there were 6 months worth of this heightened state. And I don't think there was any one particular trigger, but prior to that happening, my whole former life disintegrated. And in the course of the next year or so after that, what was left of it disintegrated. So I walked away from everything and the rest of it was taken away from me. So many times your life will go through those sorts of transitions, and if it's a big one, like in my case, I really have very little shred of what was my life back then. It's because your path ahead is so dramatically different from the path behind, to where everything has to be wiped clean for you to start a new journey. Mm-hmm.
So I have a question about your taking on the density, and then what that allows for us, I'm assuming, is new opportunities to see different potentials. Is that accurate?
Well, let's say, for example, you're walking through life and you're carrying this big, heavy rubber tire around your waist, and, well, it slows down your walking because, well, it's heavy and you can't very well run with it because it's heavy. So one of the things that it does is that weight is not there anymore. Now, the weight isn't physical, but it's vibrational. So it's preventing you from running forward in your life in many respects. So the most common thing that I find that people report is their happiness level increases. Well, the happiness level increases because you don't have this density weighing down your human experience. So even if two people, one with a lot of karmic density, one without very much, they can go through the same life experience. The one without very much will not suffer so much. They can go through a difficult life experience, see the higher purpose in it, find joy and peace. Whereas the person with a lot of density, and you know them, right, will go through even the smallest things in life with so much suffering, right? Maybe you know someone like that intimately, right? So one of the main things that happens when you remove the density, dramatically remove the density, and you are not all going to remove all of it today because, as I said, this is an entry-level event. It may not be appropriate for you to do that because the adjustment to your physical body and consciousness may be too much. So very few people will remove all their density in one visit. So come as often as you can to our events or use the YouTube videos, whatever way you can do this over and over again. Each time will take you a little further. But the reason people experience a change or an increase in happiness is because the density is not there weighing down their experience. Now, by also removing that density, we clear away the blocks to what your awareness. So in this third dimension, there are many structures that are in place that are preventing your awakening. Some of them are intentional, some of them are facilitated by a lower consciousness that is causing certain things to be in place in this world, such as, the genetically engineered foods you eat, which actually inhibit consciousness, or chemicals being sprayed in the sky, or fluoride in the water. Those things are all inhibiting your consciousness. Those, although are physical, once they enter your body, they become vibrational. And that vibrational effect increases the density. So when I say karmic density, I'm not just referring to past life or parallel life. I'm referring to also density from your environment that is also part of your energy field. So when we get rid of that, suddenly your awareness of who you are and why you're here opens up. So you start seeing opportunities for living a different life. I'll give you a good story that might be more illustrative. So I had this guy come to my event, and I haven't seen him in a long time, but he was a much older guy, and I used to give lectures on astrology a long time ago, and numerology. And so he came to one of those events because it's more rational, and it suited his mindset at the time. But at that event, he found out that I was doing these energy transfer events, which was completely off the wall for him. But anyhow, he liked my presentation on astrology and numerology so much that he wanted to come check it out. So he came to my energy transfer event a week later, right after Catholic Church. So he went to Catholic Church, and then he came to my energy transfer event, not knowing what was going to happen. Okay, so he came to the energy transfer. He had no belief at all in anything like this. So, even astrology was brand new in his world. And so he sat through the event, went home. He didn't really feel any energy or anything. A few months later, I get a call from him. And this is when I was just starting to do these events. So it was many years ago, when I actually had more time to, socialize and these kind of things. These days, my life is very busy. But so he called me and he says, hey, I'd like to take you out to lunch and talk about something. I said, okay. So we went out to lunch, and he told me, all my life, he worked in a very, some sort of government job that he had retired from recently. So all my life, I've wanted to be an artist. But I somehow ended up in this other job that I hated, but it paid the bills, and so I stayed in that job. And all of a sudden, I'm wanting to be an artist. And so within the 3 months, he had started painting again and was feeling so much joy in doing it and so much opportunity. And he said, I don't know what you did, but it had to be that, because there's no other reason why I would see this opportunity to do this. And the guy was just so vibrant, so excited about his life. So now that's a perfectly mainstream example of what happens when you remove the density. We're living in a world where the majority of people will go to college, get a job, and work in that job for however many years doing something that they hate, because the structure of this dimension is set up that way. But imagine if all of you didn't have the karmic density, you wouldn't fall into those structures. You would suddenly feel the desire to do something that was more true to your nature. So one of the things that this will do is it will help you to become aware of what is true to your nature, and it will start opening up the opportunities and avenues, and the people will come into your life to help you to make that possible. So that's one of the most common things that occurs. Now, a lot of people also, because we're removing the density that's in the way, a lot of people will also start noticing their spiritual gifts will start to manifest. And in some cases, they didn't even know they were there. In other cases, they were there as children, but then they got suppressed or forgotten, and they wake up again. So that is another possible manifestation. Health problems occur too, but see, okay, so what we're doing is, so let's use another example. Each of you, so that the karmic density will do that. The energy that I'm sending to you is going to make an adjustment to your vibrational bodies. So imagine in this room exists all kinds of information. Every one of your cell phones is tuned to a slightly different band of that information. So if someone calls one of you, everyone's phone doesn't ring. And the reason for that is because each of your phones is set up so that it only receives a very narrow band of that information. But all of that information is still here in this space, as well as satellite transmissions. And so everybody's cell phone is, all their information is coexisting in this space, along with every TV channel, every radio channel in this area, all coexists in this space, but you don't see it. In the same way, all information, all of everything that has ever happened in creation or that ever will happen on every dimension coexists right here in this space. Now, if you could all perceive all that, you would explode because it's too much, right? Now, people like Michaela and many of you, I'm sure, are trained in some way prior to incarnation to be able to tune into aspects of that information. So she's able to speak with the Pleiadians, for example, because she can tune her frequency to align with that frequency of information that is transmitted, that is in the space. So the Pleiadians are speaking in this space, but her radio tuner can tune that in, where not everybody can. So each of you has a tuner like that in your vibrational bodies, and how that tuner is set determines what band of information in the multidimensional information field comes into your awareness. And that determines what your physical body looks like. It determines the people you associate with. It determines your spiritual gifts and awareness. It determines everything. So it determines your health problems. This is why if an energy transfer, if we make a little adjustment to that dial, back when dials were actually how you did that, when we make an adjustment to that frequency, suddenly your vibrational body is tuning in a whole nother realm of information that was always there, but you didn't have any awareness of. That's part of what we're doing here. So the result of that is you'll go out of this room today and into your world in the next several weeks, months, years, and you'll be able to see a progression of your life going in a very different direction. So one thing that I noticed long before I had an awareness that I was doing this was that whenever I met people, they always went off in another direction. You know, I could never figure that out. And so now I know what's causing it, right? Yes, oh right, disclaimer, yes, okay. I forgot the disclaimer. Hold on, let me say the disclaimer, this is very important. So, I'm not responsible for your life changing in very dramatic ways. It will. And certainly if you come to me for a private session, so do that at your own risk. Your relationships will change. Some of them will evolve with you, but a lot of people who go through this process, they experience their relationships breaking up because the vibrational resonance is so different now. So you were here before and now you're here and that other person is there. And you just can't communicate. It's not a right or wrong thing. It's that you're communicating on this frequency and receiving information here and they're receiving information another level, and you cannot even coexist because you're speaking two different languages now. So your lives will be affected in very dramatic ways from going through this process. And that has been a very common theme throughout the years, long before I even knew I was doing this. So I will tell you that. So this is your opportunity to leave if you don't want to be here for that process. Do you have a question?
Well, yeah, and it's funny, my question is actually somewhat apropos what you just said. When you had your awakening and the stripping away of everything and who you were, and very traditional, did you have any type of sort of identity crisis or shock to that you needed to navigate, or was it all a very smooth transition for you?
When I shifted from my former life to this one?
Yeah, and you just had so much stripped away, and it seems as though it happened relatively quickly, so I imagine that there might have been a little bit of a shock involved, and I'm just curious if you had that and how you managed that.
Okay, well, that's a good question because I can speak to that in not only personal way, but also because many of you are going to go through that from this process. So, well, for me, it was a very now at that time I had been in business. I was making a lot of money in my companies, and I was highly respected as a trader, and I had a certain identity of who I was at that point. I had a relationship I had been in for 9 years that I thought was perfectly going all right. You know, I was happy in that situation, and I had no desire to change anything. So now, when I had that experience, all of that started to disintegrate, and it fell apart over the course of about a year and a half. So I had a decision, but at the same time, though, I had this state of bliss, this heightened state that was there, and in that state, I had an awareness of other things too. But it was only for 6 months, and after 6 months, I still had to live with my new life. And so what happened was I had to make a decision. Do I go back to my former life and do the kinds of things I was doing before? Because one of the biggest adjustments I had to make was I went from a life where I had more than enough money to live in this world and do what I wanted to I had no idea where I was going. It was an entirely new reality that I had not lived in this dimension yet at that time. So I made a conscious decision at that time that while I could go back and become a trader or even work for a brokerage house or something and do well financially, that was no longer who I was. So I walked away from all of it, not knowing how I was going to pay my bills or live or anything. I spent about 4 years of my journey from that point barely paying the bills. And in some cases, I mean, if you want me to share a personal story, I mean, I went through many years where I couldn't afford to pay for heat or electricity, and my power was shut off and my gas was turned off, and I couldn't afford to buy food, but I had been a sun gazer for many years, so I had a very low appetite anyway. So that worked out. But even, and so I met Michaela some years later, or toward the end of that experience. Now, a funny story, she would drop off grocery bags of food in front of my door because people around me were afraid that I'm going to starve to death, but they didn't realize that I really didn't require that much. So I went through many years where I made the conscious choice that I'm not going back to that life, even if it meant the costs were great. So many of you are going to have to face those kinds of things in your life. Do you follow the path that is in your heart, even if it's a path that is unknown and difficult to your ego self, not really difficult, or do you fall back into the pattern of the past? Now, majority of, I meet one-on-one with people in private sessions all throughout the week, every week, and one of the most common things I hear is, I feel like I'm here for a purpose, but they've never followed it. And why? When I ask, why have you done this? It's always, well, I'm afraid to. I'm afraid of failing. I don't know how to. So I can tell you that, so now we put on an expo in Detroit. This is our 5th one coming up this November. So if you can come join us, we'll all be there. Lots of other interesting people. But anyhow, the expo is our 5th one. I did my first one in the first several years of me having no money to even buy groceries. Now, the event costs $50,000 just for a weekend. I had no money. Okay. But I did it anyway. I had no idea how I was going to do it. I had no idea where the money was going to come from. But I knew in my heart I had to do it. So I did it. And somehow stuff just worked out. So then we went on to Expo number 2. And I still had no money. Okay, and at the time I was still doing energy transfers in our local area just to help people. So there was no money coming from any direction to pay for everything. Second expo, no money, somehow happened. Third expo, I had some money finally. Okay, but the expo didn't make money, so I paid for it. Fourth expo, I paid for again. Now I have money, but the expo still isn't. The 5th expo, well, hopefully it'll break even. But my point is that I was following what I knew I needed to do, okay, what was in my heart. And somehow the universe brought all of the right people. One of the most interesting things, now we run our organization in a highly professional way. And certainly I could do our expo in a tent in the middle of a field and it wouldn't cost anything. But we do it in nicer hotels. And our presenters have commented to me many times how it's really well run. How do you get all these people? Our expos, typically we have about 30 people or more who volunteer to run it. And I get asked all the time, how do you get all these people to work for free? I don't know. But when you're following what's in your heart, when you're doing the right thing, the universe provides the resources you need to do what you need to do. So here I am in Sedona after all these years of, following my heart. It hasn't been the ego part, the human self. It hasn't been the most easy journey because I've had to do things that I'm not used to doing and to have faith in a future that I can't really, tangibly measure. But the faith has allowed the right things to happen. So I can tell you that you all need to do the same thing. Probably most, if not all of you, already have a calling that has been inside of you for a long time, and you probably already know what it is. But you're waiting because you're waiting for the right time, or waiting for Archangel Michael to whack you on the head. I mean, something, right? But you have to take, in the third dimension, you have to take physical, tangible steps. As light workers, you can't wait until Jesus comes down and paves the way for you. You're in the third dimension. In the third dimension, we have certain structures like time or money that exist in this dimension that you have to work with. And you don't have to, but if you're not going to, then you're not going to live up to your potential here. Each one of you could change the world. You wouldn't be in this audience right now if that potential wasn't in you, because I know why I'm here, and I'm here for people like that. And you wouldn't be here in this room if you weren't people like that. But maybe some of you are doing that. I don't know. But if you're not, why aren't you? You have to take those physical, tangible steps to put yourself out there so that the world can experience why you're here. So that you can help this whole collective consciousness to move forward into a new era. So the answer to your question, I don't know if that answered the question, but essentially, there wasn't any specific kind of experience that caused that shift of awareness. But for me, I won't say that it was an easy thing, because I think the hardest part for me was I was always very successful. In that previous period of my life, I was very successful in the conventional idea of what success is anyway. And that's the world I lived in up to that point. I was surrounded by money people who traded the markets, people who were in business. So my measure of success was that. I had to let go of the only thing that was my measure of what I was doing in the world as being worthwhile. And I was raised in a conventional household where that's all that mattered. So that was probably the most difficult thing for me, was to say, okay, well, I don't care how much money is involved, I'm not going to do that. And each of you has something that is that for you, and you're going to have to trust that if you're going in the right direction, everything will line up. Now, I work with a lot of very brilliant, gifted people like Michaela to help them to figure out what that is and put them out into the world. And I can tell you that for those who actually hang in there, they all end up doing that. So I know from that each of you has that capacity in you. Now, sometimes you need somebody like me to make you uncomfortable and to make you do those things, but which is what I'm very good at. But I know that you all have it in you. Whether you need a friend to push you in that direction or someone like me to do that, I know it's all in you. But the most common issue that I find is many very highly conscious individuals are unable to function very well in the third dimension, because you lack the understanding of how the structures here work. And I think this is why I spent most of my life developing those structures in my own life, and why I use those now with, in a different way. Any other questions? Well, we'll do the energy transfer in 15 minutes, and I do that because I have people participating remotely as well at that time. So I'm going to include them in this process also. I have people in my advanced program who participate at 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. Eastern every day, so I can just include them in this process here today as well. Did you have a question?
Could you talk a little bit more about your advanced programs and how you blend Eastern and Western astrology?
Yes, sure. Now, my advanced programs, like the energy transfer program, there are 12 sessions each month for those who are ready for that. And it's a little bit more accelerated than one session here today is not the same as one session in that program. Now, if this is your first time and you're energy sensitive, it may be overwhelming for you. Everybody's different. As unique as your physical body is from the person next to you, how you respond to the energy is different. Whether you feel something or feel nothing doesn't really matter. Barb has been able to observe everyone in my audience over all the years we've been doing this in our local area. Some people come who their wife, dragged them there and they don't believe in any of this stuff, and she can always see the difference in the energy field. So we know it works whether the person has a belief of it or not, and we know it works whether they feel the energy or not. So you don't have to worry about sensations. But oftentimes, if this is your first time experiencing this, you may have more of a sensory experience than if you've been doing it over time. So one of my remote sessions is at a higher level of intensity and growth than one of these. But if it's your first time, it may feel intense anyway. So 12 sessions a month is typically what I recommend, unless you can't handle that much, in which case you can spread them out. You just go to my website and sign up for it, and you can schedule your sessions right there as well. So I've had some people who have been in the program for many years, since I first started offering it a few years ago. So it's up to you to decide how fast you want to go and at what level you want to grow. And so I don't make any recommendations because everyone is different. I have people who come to my physical events once and I never see them again. And I have ones who have been in my advanced program for many years, 12 sessions a month. And so it's a little bit more accelerated. So if you're ready for that and you think that that's something that suits you, then give that a shot. The in-person sessions, I charge a lot more for because my in-person time is very limited these days, so I don't do very many one-on-one energy transfer sessions, but they are at a higher level of intensity, and so in one session there, you're going to take a huge leap forward, but your adjustment may be a lot greater too. So just be aware of that yes, you'll take a huge step forward, but your adjustment process is going to be dramatic. So I don't do very many of those for many reasons, but so there's that. I have a light worker program, which Michaela was one of my first in the light worker program. So that includes energy transfer sessions. So we work with you on multi-dimensions, energy transfer working vibrationally, and then I work with the individual in the third dimension to help them develop their gifts, train them, prepare a professional brand, develop their business model, financial model, create opportunities for them to get out into the world. Not just to affect a few people, but my goal is to help an individual to make a global impact. So the reason being is that my main mission as an individual in this life is to raise the consciousness of the planet. So if I can get one of you out there to affect millions of people in the world in your work, and many generations to come into the future after your incarnation is over, well, I've accomplished that goal through many people versus just me doing it. So that's the purpose of my Lightworker program. That's a long-term relationship, so it's not just a one-time session, it's an ongoing thing. But ultimately, you'll be like Michaela, is what she's doing in the world. So I work with people on that level. That's my most involved. Now, in that, we work one-on-one twice a month. And there's 12 energy transfers. And then my astrology, numerology sessions are, Well, I've learned a number of different schools of thought on astrology, numerology. Some Western systems, some Eastern systems. I blend them into one, and it's because I find that they're all limited. At least my experience has been that way. Every system has, and I have not studied all of them, but I've combined just certain ones that I've studied over the years. And I find that certain schools of thought on numerology and other schools of thought on numerology, they have very interesting parts of a puzzle that is not complete. And my belief is that all these systems coexisted at one time in the time of Pythagoras. And that Pythagoras, if any of you know the story of Pythagoras, he was known for teaching astrology and numerology, but he never wrote anything down. So the education was taught to initiates in a secret school, and no one was taught the same thing. So you were taught verbally. You were not allowed to write it down or teach anyone else. So when he died, there were all these different students with different levels of understanding who went out into the world with their individual pieces, and it became these many different schools of thought on astrology and numerology that were splintered from the original body of knowledge. So my belief is that in order for us to have a whole understanding, we have to bring them back together. I wouldn't say that that's I've done that to any great degree, but I do combine many different systems into my understanding. And I find that numerology and astrology together are a really great complement. They fill in parts of understanding that the other one does not have. Now, my focus, because I have spent most of my life in very grounded fields of work, business, financial, my focus in using these tools is very three-dimensional. So I use them to help people to understand what to do in their life and how to. So in my Lightworker program, we use astrology and numerology as a means to navigate the life, that person's life and where we're going together. So anyway, it's that's. I hope that explains a little bit. Yeah. Sure. Anyone else? Any questions? Well, let's do the energy transfer, and then we have probably a few minutes afterward if anyone has any questions to ask. So let me explain the process a little bit. First of all, I want you to trust that no harm is going to come to me in the process. We've been doing this for many years, and if anything adverse had happened, Barb would have told me by now. And certainly, while we're sitting here, there are people all over the world who are sending karmic density to me. So this has been going on for a long time. So no harm will come to me. So I want you to trust that process. I will be doing two things. I'll be sending a white light energy from my heart center to each of yours. That's intended to raise your vibration, your consciousness. It will increase your energy field. So over the years we've been doing it. Barb has said that everybody's energy field doubles, triples, quadruples at least. So, and it's cumulative. The more often you do it, the larger it gets. And so it builds month after month, or the more often you do it. So for those of you who are healers, one of the great benefits of that is that the bigger your energy field, the more you have a cushion between you and the outer environment. So if you're concerned about taking on the energy of other people, the larger your aura, the less you have to worry about that. I'm not suggesting you should do what I do. You shouldn't do that. But just in your everyday life and in healing work you do, you have this built-in protection as your energy field gets larger that will shield you from, or rather neutralize the energy in your environment so that it doesn't come into you and cause discomfort. So one of the side effects of that is that your health will improve, of course, and if you're standing in an elevator, you're going to affect that person standing next to you more than if your energy field is smaller. So your aura will increase, and in this energy is also multidimensional consciousness and information that you will start to dismantle in your mind over the course of the next weeks, months, that will contribute to your understanding of your universe. So the world will look very different to you in the future than it has prior to today. So we'll be doing this as a two-step process. Now, when you're sending that karmic density to me, you can do it very simply as an intention that you're ready to release whatever density to me at that time, and just hold that intention. This collective consciousness will do all the work. You can't do it wrong. Just, that's all you need to do. Now, if you want to more actively participate, and some people do, and if there's something in your life that's causing you negative emotions or something, you can focus on that thing and intend for that energy to come to me. That's okay too. Or if you pray to a particular consciousness or God, then you can pray to that God and ask that your karmic density be released to me. You can visualize that too if you're visual. Now, all these are extra tools I'm giving you. You don't need to use any of them. You can just simply sit there with intention. They will do all the work. But if you want to, you can visualize it as a dark cloud and send that dark cloud to the top of my head and keep doing that for the entire time. We'll go for about 10 or 15 minutes until I ask you to open your eyes. My eyes will be closed too during this time. So I'll be sending a white light to your heart center for the whole time, and you'll be sending this density to me for the entire time. So any questions before we start? Okay, so you can relax. I like to play a little music in the background for those of you who might be familiar with Mark Romero. He's a friend of ours, and he speaks at our expo once in a while. He's a high vibrational musician. I find his music very conducive to this type of work. So I'll play that in the background, and as long as the music is playing, just relax, breathe comfortably, close your eyes. And I want you to focus your intention on whatever karmic density you're ready to release to me today. And if you'd like, you can visualize that as a dark cloud. Leaving the top of your head, send it to mine. Keep doing it until I ask you to open your eyes. And I'll be sending a white light from my heart center to yours for the whole time as well. So I'll be silent now, play a little music in the background, and I'll come back when we're done. Well, you may have felt something or not felt something. Either way, it's good. So we're at an amazing time in the awakening of consciousness right now, and this is why I'm here doing this work that I'm doing. It's to help all of you to step into that and to be one of the pioneers in this move toward a higher consciousness world. Anyone have anything they want to share, or yes?
I thought it was a very profound experience. I have no idea what to make of it at this point. However, more than me, I felt like my whole family, brothers, sisters, cousins, uncles, aunts, all of the people in my life got touched by this. And they all came flashing in one after another. And I was clearly unexpected. And I feel extremely moved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
The audible live stream, the inner sound, when you were doing your presentation, you can really loud. So, it was awesome. It was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Mm-hmm.
I do them all the time on YouTube. And I made a message to you one time, and I think I did some old ones, and they kind of wore out for me or something. And then you put some new ones out there, and I got recharged. But I mean, this was 10 times. Have you even thought maybe I need to move to Michigan? No, he needs to move here. Well, there you go.
There's a big spiritual community there. Thank you.
I was just going to say that for the first portion of it, I really was just allowing things to go. And then I felt like actually energy was moving up through the earth through me and out, almost like you facilitating release of density from the earth here.
Mm-hmm.
Which was really amazing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have the advantage of probably having the most energy transfers in this room. And I can see when this is going on. This was really profound because I could see a grid. It was definitely collective, and I don't know if it was just amplified because of the vortexes and everything that we're in the midst of, but I've never seen your energy transfer quite like this. I mean, I could go on in detail, but there was this just entire grid in this room that opened up and was spinning and moving, and I was seeing everyone connecting to it and beyond. And the aura colors were changing. I was seeing everyone with this light of them. So many guides in the room. It was really a profound one, based on what I've seen and felt before.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
I was feeling gratitude just the whole time. I was just so grateful for everything that we are going through right now and experiencing. And I also felt this grid of us all being connected here.
Thank you. Yes.
I had no idea how much density I was holding until I really became aware of it and started the transfer.
Mm-hmm. So you feel different now?
Oh yeah, definitely still feeling that little tingly sensation on my chest.
Very good.
That walk through the whole session.
Thank you. Okay, well, we have a little bit of time, about 15 minutes, so if anybody has any questions about anything, because of the luxury of the life I live these days, I'm surrounded by some amazing people in all different walks of life, and so I have access to a lot of things, and if you don't watch my show, that may be a great avenue for you to learn about some of the amazing things. Yeah.
I was fascinated by, is it Lloyd
Mir?
Mir?
Mm-hmm.
I was watching that one the other day.
Yeah.
And Michaela, you had talked about that you had experienced a healing too from doing some of his vibrational frequencies.
Oh, Lloyd Mir, yes. I was blessed to have an appointment with him and face to face. I don't know if he's really doing that anymore, but yes.
Is with your understanding of numerology, I was really curious. what your perception is with, he does all these like numerical vibrational frequencies, and he tunes into all these numbers that somehow overlay. I just got his book, so I'm just starting.
Yep.
But
it's not numerology, what he's doing.
But he's got, they're
numbers, yes.
Sequences.
Okay, well, all right, so let me explain what's happening. So we're human beings, and as human beings, we've been conditioned in a third dimensional reality to think in many ways, very rational, left brain, intellectual ways. Now, Lloyd, I can't remember, he was some sort of an engineer, I think. I can't recall, right? Something like that. Okay. So, because of his background, he interprets information a certain way. So, for example, so I work with a lot of light workers like Michaela, for example, and one of the things that I find is that what you're supposed to do with your life, or rather your life mission, is present in what you've already done. So those who are in the medical field, in the conventional medical field, are most likely healers. They just haven't stepped into that. And so most often they'll take what they learned in that field and translate it into something of a higher dimension. Because Lloyd's mind works in a mathematical sort of way, he is interpreting vibrational information into numbers. So it's no different than a person doing any other kind of healing modality who may not be interpreting it as numbers. So there's no relationship between numerology and the frequencies he's using, but he's basically, his mind is interpreting this multidimensional information and categorizing it with numbers and saying, well, this set of numbers does this, and this set of numbers does this, and therefore, if you read this set of numbers, you are invoking the frequency of that set of numbers. That's all that's happening there. There's no connection between that and numerology necessarily. But Lloyd's a very fascinating guy. I'm not really sure if he's still doing work. He was one of my very first shows years ago. But he has been able to, actually one of the more fascinating stories, if you listen to the interview, it's really cool because it brings into tangible reality what is possible with frequency. He figured out that, and so he does all this intuitively. He's an older guy, doesn't believe in any of this stuff. So, but he came to have to accept it. So when he had this intuition that certain frequency numbers were present in gold. So, physical gold. And so he took these numbers and he wrote them on the side of little round canisters that would collect the particles in the water. And he put these frequencies in a row in a stream. And he came back sometime later and he collected the last one in the series. And what he found out was these frequency numbers actually were all part of what was present in the vibration of gold. And he came back and he found that in his canister he collected a chunk of gold. So what he actually had managed to do was to take this water and to charge it with these different frequencies, and as it flowed through each frequency, it eventually assembled in this third dimension as gold. So it brings into reality the idea of alchemy and be able to produce gold from other materials. He's able to do that using frequency. Now, I've seen other people actually do that using other kinds of alchemical methods. So all things that exist in this material reality are synthesized through frequency that's projected from other realities. We are projections from multidimensional creation. So, but that's why it works that way. If he didn't have a mathematical background, he would have interpreted that some other way. We all do that in our own unique ways. Anyone else? Anything? Yeah. Oh, good. You go ahead.
When you do these projections, I'm just wondering why I have such an amazing remembrance of all of my family, dead and alive, come to be present. So do they get affected with your permission?
Yes.
By invitation, or what's that?
Well, yeah, as I said earlier, all beings who are part of your experience are there by their own free will. So all your experiences as a soul have already happened. So this moment that you experienced here was always going to happen in this moment here. You are always leading up to this moment. And all of those who have been in your incarnations that you experienced were all aware and in agreement with this moment happening. So their free will was already exercised before they came into that awareness of that life that they experienced. So they grew through your growth as well. So it isn't a matter of, we as human beings don't realize that the idea of free will, and I'm probably going to get a lot of people get mad at me for saying this, but the idea of free will is an egocentric construct. It's an egoic construct. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It is a projection of our ego selves, because if we could accept that all of creation is always in harmony, even the parts of creation that we don't really like are always in harmony and always flowing in a direction that God makes no mistakes in creation or experience, then we could accept that the life we came here to live is the life that we're living. You're all exactly where you're supposed to be right now. There was nowhere else you were going to be right now. And therefore, everyone in your life is also where they're going to be and supposed to be right now. So those decisions were made prior to this incarnation by their higher awareness, their multidimensional selves. And their multidimensional selves, even though they're conscious egocentric self, not a negative thing, ego meaning your identity self, my identity self, that is Ethann, that is sitting here, has a multidimensional aspect to this self that is aware of all things. And that self is what's making the decisions for this self. So my ego self doesn't get to decide whether or not I get to participate in this or that. It's that other self. And that other self knows better than me and makes those decisions. So even though your relatives or whoever might not have, in their conscious human self, chosen such an experience, their other multidimensional self chose that experience. Now, there are many people, many of you, mostly, most of our audiences, both Michaela's and mine, are women. Not by accident, it's because most men are not waking up at the same pace as women yet. And so, quite often, I find women in marriages with men who are at a very different level of consciousness. And they are struggling with that because this man that they're with does not understand them, can't relate to them, or they're single and they just can't find men who are on that level, right? But the thing you have to understand is that person would not be in your life if they didn't have an unconscious, multidimensional acceptance that you, by being in their life, were going to awaken them. They may be totally resistant to it, don't even care what you're doing, think you're off your rocker, who knows? But their other self, their higher self, their multidimensional self, came into that marriage in agreement to be with somebody who is at a higher awakened state in order to help them grow when they're not conscious enough to do it on their own. So you are, if you're in such a relationship, you're facilitating that person's awakening, even if they're kicking and screaming all the way, right? And that's all good. So it may not feel great to be in that kind of relationship, but you chose to be there to help that individual. I did a show recently with this woman, her name escapes me, but she was a military contractor in Iraq, and she was, any of you watch that show? Okay, all right, so some of you know the story. Anyway, she was in a roadside bomb and had very severe injuries and actually died. And she went to the other side and was able to communicate with all these beings who were working with her in this incarnation. And one of the experiences she had there was she was with these two other beings who helped her to choose. First of all, they told her, you're going back because you're not supposed to be dead yet. So, but they told her, in going back, though, you get to choose what injuries you're going to have, because you're going to have some, but we can play with it and decide which ones you want to have. And so she got to play with this multidimensional being who, and she said what it was like was they would give her a certain injury, and then they would project what her life would be like in this world with that injury. And she said she and this other being, they were just laughing because it was so funny. These injuries that made her debilitated in certain ways that were just hilarious to them in this other reality. And so she said that all of us choose our injuries. So if we have difficulties in our life or relationships that are not very great to us, we chose those debilitating experiences out of fun, out of play. And so I asked her, well, did you ever have a chance to talk to the person who set that roadside bomb? And she said yes. And I said, well, what was that like? And she said, well, what I realized was that we did it together. Before the incarnation happened, we had an agreement, and this is exactly how she said it. She said, we said, well, wouldn't it be fun if I blew you up in this life, and then you get to see what that's like? And she said, yeah, that'd be really fun, So it was a very fun thing in that other reality. And then she went through the experience. I mean, how many of us would want to get blown up, right? But in our higher awareness self, we don't see things like war and suffering as negative. We see those as play. We see it as Earth is a big theater, and we get to play our parts. And if we really get into that part and play it up well, then the audience loves us and we have a really full experience. But once the show is over and the curtains go down, we get to go home. And none of it was real. So your experience is that way. So if you're going through suffering in your life, understand that you chose that because it was fun. You just don't think it's very fun when you do it. Okay.
I was going to say, there's some people that you might work on if you're a healer that are just so attached to their suffering. They are just so married to it and they're not letting it go for anything.
Right.
And you just wonder, is some aspect of them, because sometimes even when you step into their energy on the other side, that you see them curled up in a ball somewhere, right? And you wonder what part of them is having fun and where, because sometimes it feels like even their other part of them is not their higher self, but some aspect of their energy is also participating on the other side.
In the suffering? Well, suffering is okay. So take out of suffering your attachment to the suffering. So let's say you choose to come into life to go through a really terrible or difficult relationship, emotionally turbulent, and it really sucks, and there's not much feeling of love there, and you suffer through this experience. Well, suffering and that emotion and that experience of going through it, if you weren't so attached to it, it could be fun. It could be, yes, there is a part of you on the other side that's participating and egging you on. Mm-hmm. But that other side of you that is participating knows that this is a good thing, mm-hmm. and that you're evolving and that this other person is evolving, and by coming to you, you're evolving. They're also facilitating something for you, your own growth experience, so that you can learn and grow as well. So it's a multifaceted experience. It's not just that person going through it, you are too. So you can't judge it in that way. One of the side effects of energy transfers is, as I said, your happiness level increases. Well, the reason it does is because you are not attached to experiences the way that you were before. So you may go through the same difficult circumstances in your life and it doesn't really faze you as much. So I find one of the things that I hear a lot is people who are in relationships that are very turbulent. They come to an energy transfer and they tell me later, I don't know what it is, but this person used to really irritate me, but they don't anymore. And it's because your density is less, your consciousness is higher, you sort of rise above that experience. So in that way, you could still go through the same difficult experience and sort of see it as an observer of your experience while going through it. So you're more connected to the higher aspect of yourself. So think of it this way. If you're more connected to the higher aspect of yourself and you go through a difficult thing in your life, then you're not experiencing it like you were before, right? Because now you see it as from a higher perspective. This is why suffering lessens through energy transfers. People of a lower consciousness with a lot of density, like your clients that's why they suffer so much. They probably brought an immense amount of karmic density into this life. Take some of that away and they'll be more willing to let go of that. Even if their life doesn't change that much, they can still go through that with less effort. So does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Give me your number.
Anyone else? Oh, have we time? Okay. All right. Time is up for today. Thank you for having us out in Sedona. I know we're planning on coming back next spring, I think, possibly, most likely.